Hi, I'm Dr. Rick Rieser. The reason I studied PTSD is because I have a surrogate son who I got to know when I was living in San Francisco in the homeless region, who just come back from Iraq. His parents had died before and during the time he was in the military, and he only spent one tour in Iraq. But when he came, he was very disabled. He shared with me that every time we went into a restaurant, he knew where every weapon was, he knew where every exit was, and he knew where everyone was in the room. I never knew that until years later when I was studying PTSD. I know my sister has PTSD. She has PTSD from the 9/11 event because she was working 2 miles from Ground Zero when the planes entered the World Trade Center. And at the end of the day, she walked down there and saw what happened. She has PTSD. And the other person that has PTSD that I want to talk about is Steve Irwin. Steve Irwin has PTSD, had PTSD, he's dead now, but Steve Irwin had PTSD when somebody accidentally shot his dog. I know that PTSD among the military is running rampant. And I want to share with you, especially during this war that you're fighting in the Middle East. You cannot grow up in the Judeo-Christian society that we have in the United States and then walk into a war zone and look at a woman who's covered in a shawl or a 5-year-old girl who's playing in the street as enemy. You cannot do that without being affected. Whether you're from the Korean War, World War II, Vietnam, or Iraq, I want you to know that it's because of you that I have never seen a gun fired in anger or fear. I have been able to walk my 64 years on this planet without ever having seen anything like what you've seen. I understand that it's not easy to go through life with this kind of experience, and I can understand. And in some cases, you guys come back from the military, you get separated from your dogs, that's it. That's when your PTSD starts. That needs to change. The Defense Department cannot separate you from your dogs when you get back from the military. That dog needs to stay with you for the rest of its life. PTSD patients that are coming back from the military have certain problems, and I want to share with you some of them. One of them is your irrational anger issues. It makes it very difficult for you to be able to have a personal relationship that's meaningful, that lasts very long. Another problem that you have is by and large, as members of the military, is when you get back from the military, you have no ability to back down from a fist fight. I saw my son get into many fist fights when he was living in San Francisco, and I was saying, like, why? You're never going to see this guy again. Doesn't matter. It didn't matter. And I know that this is going to happen with almost every one of you guys that's coming out of the military. I've had people so disabled coming back from Vietnam, and I had one patient who told me that he couldn't even look at his laundry without thinking there might be an unexploded hand grenade in it or a Claymore mine wrapped up in it, because he saw people in Vietnam destroyed when the cleaning lady brought back their clothing. Okay, enough of that. What I'm going to talk about now is what can you do about PTSD and what can't you do about it. What you can do about PTSD is therapy, but not one-on-one therapy. One-on-one therapy is very misguided in this country. As a matter of fact, if a therapist ever says to you, you're not alone, the thing that I would say to the therapist if I had PTSD is I'd go like this. What's going on? I thought I was the only one in here. The only reason I say that is because in PTSD, you prefer to be alone. It's clear you prefer to be alone. I've got patients that are coming down from the hills in Chico, and the only thing that this one guy did, PTSD all the way, so PTSD that his nightmares He could not even, he couldn't sleep with anybody all night long. He couldn't have a relationship with a woman. He was heterosexual, but he couldn't have a relationship with a woman. She wouldn't stay with him through the night. That guy comes down from the hills, and all he does one thing. He just comes down, gets his recommendation for medical marijuana. He goes right back to his cabin, and he has his marijuana delivered to him, as well as his groceries. Okay. One-on-one therapy doesn't work for PTSD. It does not work. If you can find a therapist with PTSD, they'd make a great drinking buddy, but they're not going to be able to do your therapy. It takes a group of people to do your therapy. It's like a community. Group therapy is the most effective. It's the most effective way of treating your therapy. Okay. PTSD has been around for a long time. As a matter of fact, the earliest recollection that I have of PTSD is a story my mother told me in the 1960s about a survivor of the Titanic. This was a guy who, when he got back from the Titanic, first thing he did was he went to a Yankees game. And he was fine watching the game. He loved baseball until somebody hit a home run and everybody started to scream. They stood up and started screaming. All he could hear was the screaming of the people in the water. Okay, that was a trigger. And that's what you can do. That's what you can do something about. According to the people that I've talked with, the nightmares never go away. That's what the indica is for. Or as one Vietnam War veteran said to me, that's what God made indica for. Indica is really good at making you so in a way that you don't remember your dreams. Or as my younger brother, the psychiatrist, says, that's because people with PTSD, people with that smoke pot don't remember anything. Well, you do remember things. You do remember, especially chronic users, they do remember a lot of things, especially what's going on in the daytime. So what is happening to you in the daytime is triggers, just like the sounds or whatever it is that triggers you to think about what happened back then. That's why group therapy. What you do in group therapy, and the thing to lean on with group therapy, is what to do about the triggers. And you can't do it with a one-on-one therapist. There's not enough information in that one person to give you any ideas of what to do. But a group of people can help. So what I'm urging you to do, I'm urging all my patients to get into group therapy. And not every group therapy works, but if you're coming out of a military experience, the VA has a wonderful program. Let me share with you. I was in Atlanta in 2005 working for a drug rehab. During that year, the VA next door to the CDC in Atlanta put on the first workshop for PTSD. They opened it up in the VA's infinite wisdom. They opened it up to veterans, figuring it was going to fill with veterans from Iraq. Well, it filled within a half hour. There was 50% were Vietnam, 50% were from Iraq, and there was one guy, 93 years old, who was there from World War II. I don't want any of the soldiers that I meet to have to wait till they're 93 in order to get help. I want you to get help early. I want you to get help as soon as you recognize this is going on in your life. Okay. What I tell everybody is that group therapy. Okay, I have to mention two other things. One is hypnotism. I had one patient this year. I've interviewed close to 1,000 patients with PTSD over this last year and a half. And I can tell you that the people that talk to me about PTSD, by and large, are using group therapy, but there was this one guy that told me that hypnotism worked. Hypnotism, as I know it, growing up and going through my life, now I'm 64, hypnotism only works on some people. It doesn't work for everybody. And it doesn't work under the auspices of every person that's performing it. So if you can be hypnotized, and if you can find a good hypnotist and you have the money to pay for it, then you might want to experiment with getting hypnotized to get better. The person that I found that was in the best shape and the worst was a Vietnam War veteran who's actually older than me. He's 67 now. And he was in therapy. He got into 3 groups. He was being treated for shell shock during the 1980s and early 90s. He was in 3 groups before he got into the 4th group. He stayed in the 4th group twice a week with the same 9 guys for 2 years. And now he walks down the street with an imaginary tennis racket, swinging it back and forth, going, "That was a trigger." That was a trigger. But he was able to go to opening night of Star Wars. He was able to go to the mall on Christmas Eve just to look at the girls. And he no longer has to look to see which exits or where the exits are when he sits down in a restaurant. And he doesn't have to go through his laundry anymore to look for an unexploded grenade or a Claymore mine. So he's back with us. So if you have PTSD and you're military, and I've sent you to this tape, there's a couple more things I need to share with you. I want you all to visit Mount Rushmore, and I want you to visit the Lincoln Memorial. And the reason is because you own it. If it wasn't for you, the Taliban would have turned it into sand. And it's yours. You own it. So go see it. Go stand at the foot of the Mount Rushmore and just cry, because it's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sculpture. All right, so I guess I've thanked you for doing your service. And, oh, one more thing, and that's about dogs. Dogs are extremely well suited for human beings' emotional connection. If you are the primary caregiver of a dog, then it doesn't really matter what kind of dog it is. Dogs are so tuned into human beings that dogs even, I had one veteran tell me that his dog just learned it on his own to wake him up when he was having a nightmare. Now, I know that dogs can be trained to do this, but this dog learned it on his own. So we've been having dogs around us for probably 10 to 12,000 years at least. And it's a pretty profound relationship that we have with them. And so please feel free to take advantage of that relationship. And one more thing, and that is that if you have PTSD and you have children, you have to be aware that the children have to be able to touch you. A child has to be able to run around the room at like a freight train and then come right up to your legs with both of his elbows like this and just look at you. You can't flinch. You gotta be available. You gotta be emotionally available for that child. I tell everybody that gets into group therapy, fall in love with everybody and don't take any of them home with you. Well, I said that to this one Vietnam War vet, and he said, "Oh no, we get together every 6 months." Well, that's as a group. They get together as a reunion every 6 months since 1991. That I can appreciate. But if you get into a one-on-one relationship with somebody with PTSD and you ever have a fight, and believe me, people who are close to each other fight, I just don't want any of my patients to get into a situation where it escalates till a fist fight comes. Because when the fist fight comes, one of you is going to go to the hospital and the other one's going to go to jail. And it's just not appropriate. I don't want anybody to have to deal with that. So I don't want you to try and find a date at group therapy for PTSD. I want you to fall in love with everybody in the room, but I don't think it's a good idea to take anybody home with you. So I hope this video has helped some of you find your way back into this world. That the communities that we live in are really, really in good shape. And the reason is because we've defended the Constitution. And all of us have defended it, but not like you guys. So welcome back into our wonderful world that you guys helped create. Thank you.